Well, here we. Oh, Dr. Marie's. Dr. Marie.
Hey there.
I can't believe I'm saying this. Unmute, Dr. Marie.
I
Dr.
can't
Maury.
hear anybody. Give me a second
Oh,
here.
no,
I
there
don't
you
wanna
are.
hear
You're
you.
good. You're good.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, we got Dr. Marie. We got Saul Rosenthal here. Saul, please tell us about that awesome conference you have on the Northeast.
Well, so we're coming up to the Northeast Region Biofeedback Society's annual conference. It is the first weekend in November. It's the first one we're going to do live or in person since pre-pandemic, but it's actually going to be hybrid. So if you can't make it to Philadelphia, it will be streamed as well, but it's right outside the Philadelphia airport that weekend. Jay's going to be our keynote speaker on Friday night. And then there's a whole bunch of different sorts of things. It's a little bit of a different kind of conference, I think, than most others. So it should be fun.
How big is this screen going to be?
for Jay alone or for everyone else? I don't know. That's a good question. But yeah, so if you go to nrbs.org to register and to look to find out more about it.
Saul, NRBS, how long has it been around?
NRBS has been around, I would say 20 to 30 years or so.
Wow.
I'm actually doing a project where I'm interviewing some of the old presidents to kind of get a little history. So that's kind of a...
Wait, there's been more than you?
I am not president. I am just a lowly board member, which is fine with me. No, Mitch Sadar is the president, and Angelica Sadar is the executive director.
Husband and wife?
Yep, exactly. A little nepotism there, I guess, but that's okay.
Saul, I have a question for you.
Oh, hey, Joy.
Hello, how are you? Oh,
I'm good. It's been a million years.
Saul's a good buddy. Yay. So I will share a perspective of a former ISNR president.
That'll be you?
Yeah. Yeah. But the issue was, so at the meeting where we...
Oh, wait a minute. What is... Oh, sorry, Joy.
There goes the neighborhood.
And now we have another gentleman.
Tucson City of the West Wind, Jay Gunkelman?
Only momentarily.
Should we sing him happy birthday?
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Jay. Happy birthday to you. Yeah, buddy. Jay, thank you for stopping by.
Now I know why they make you play the bass. I don't know if you can carry a tune. So.
Wow.
Oh, Jay, thank you for showing up, man. Better than what I'm doing for you, man. 75th birthday, Tucson City. Are you about to register everybody here in about an hour or two?
In fact, I'm only on for a very, very bit.
Yeah.
I have to go change out of this scrub to the Tucson City scrubs and
absolutely
go down to the reception for the evening for people that are popping in. But it's for the next 3 days. And we've got 30 people scattered across the world for live streaming it. So we'll try to behave.
You can't even not keep a straight face on that one, Jay.
I'm doing my best.
Oh,
so
Jay, you're gonna stream it, record it, and people can get it there.
Yeah.
They can't go there in person.
You won't get the full effect, but but the content will be there from the talks, and there's some I think talks that are well worth attending, and some panel discussions that'll try and stir it up a little bit. So, but
Jay, is there anything you want to leave us with before you go? Any pending thoughts that you want to stir up the pot with?
Well, I have to thank Anthony, for beating the street for articles. Interesting cross pollination between forever chemicals and blood work that correlate. Not that it was a study that looked at dosing kids with it, but the PFAS correlation with 80 minutes of less sleep, and the PFAS are known to mess up the genetics of sleep regulation. So that we've known that sleep has been not so good because we saw the theta beta ratio, which the FDA at one point actually accepted as a diagnostic metric, but it doesn't, I mean, it's no good. They accepted it just about the time that it was no good. But the norms of 3 standard deviations being 5 to 1 in 1999, by 2006, Urey's data showed a 7 to 1 as 3 standard deviations out. So anyway, we're looking at chemicals that end up interacting with neurology. So it's psychoneuroimmunology basically, and the less sleep per night has been observed, and its impact on the theta beta ratio has been observed. Yeah. Now we have been shown to help with sleep and sleep quality and all of that. I don't know that the chemical effect is a permanent problematic change, or whether it's something that can be treated, but undoubtedly over time we're going to find out. The world's got PFAS and microplastics everywhere. So
that's my question about it, because I glanced at the study, and what I took away was the genetic changes that these chemicals are making. So you're right. I mean, typically sleep is one of the first things that we see change and modulate, but those aren't usually people that we know of have genetic problems mixed in, right? So what do you think our chances are when we're dealing with genetic? I mean, other stuff that has genetic foundations, I think there's only so much we can do.
Well, those genes don't all express. There's the whole phenotype.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
so, and epigenetics. I mean, let's not forget the little epi in front of that. Right.
Well, no, I mean,
and how many generations for it to come in, and how many generations for it to come out?
Well, and that's the next question: is does this get passed down genetically?
Yeah.
Do those changes happen that way too? Because are we looking at the next crop of kids coming in with sleep problems, and we can't really ding those because they have a different cause? I don't know.
Well, so far we've seen major improvement in quality of sleep with neurofeedback approaches. Yeah. The beta spindle is not the only kind of insomnia. You can have an obsessive compulsive drive that'll keep you awake as rumination too, independent of the beta spindle, which is the wakefulness drive driven by orexin, totally different chemistry. But the whole psychoneuroimmunology shows the cross-disciplinary depth that we really are dabbling with playing with the brain. So.
Yeah. And also, let's just not forget common sense, as they say, which is get into bed, turn the lights and the devices off, and get yourself your 7 to 8 hours as an adult and a little bit more as a kid. Right? We can do all kinds of neurotherapy, all kinds of things, but if you're not in your bed, not being distracted by anything but a teddy bear.
If you're concerned about PFAS, you also don't have the fragrance left in your sheets and softeners and things like that, which are all full of PFAS. So we surround ourselves with the chemicals, and some of them basically because of your job as well. Fire and refinery workers that have to wear Nomex, they're walking around with cancer risk exposure on their clothes. So,
Jay, before you go, Sal Rosenthal stopped by to say hello to you and wish you a happy 75th.
I should have blown. Wow, my goodness! I blew the group up, big full screen. There he is.
Yeah, hanging out.
He's got. We have Susun City this week, and then Saul. When is your gig coming up?
Yeah, so Northeast Region is the first weekend in November, which you will be giving the keynote Friday night, I believe.
Yeah, I've got to talk for them too.
Yep.
Big screen.
Big screen,
Well, we'll see if I look the same. I don't know whether anybody's gonna bid on something this short. It's only been a year since they chopped it off, so
Right.
that they might leave it be for another year till it's a respectable size to bid on.
Jay, before you go, Radar Ashwood asks, how does neurofeedback affect someone who's had their adrenal glands removed or has had some sort of adrenal insufficiency, like a pituitary removed?
Well, you do need your pituitary. Don't have it taken out. Mine is missing for a reason. I had a brain tumor that destroyed it. But you need your adrenals to produce cortisol. And as bad a reputation as cortisol has, it modulates your immune system. And without it, I would have gone a long time ago. I eat cortisol in the morning. I eat cortisol in the afternoon. Hydrocortisone as a steroid. So my life depends on this stuff. Otherwise, my immune system would have taken me out years ago. So your adrenals are there to modulate your cortisol level, which modulates based on stress, and you can burn them out with chronic high levels of stress and arousal, and quite often with the use of chemicals to jack yourself up too long, too hard, you can burn them out as well. But when you lose your adrenals, you're going to look very, very depressed. And classic bipolar has beta spindles in the EEG. In the manic state, it doesn't switch to an alpha dominant pattern during the depressed phase. Their adrenals give out. When the adrenals recover, they're back. And for those that have cycling bipolar, if you're in the depressed phase and your endocrinologist gives you a cortisol challenge, it'll pop you back up into the manic-y state in a flash, but it's only for a flash because you're going to burn it right off. It's not a natural source. But the adrenals are part of the HPA axis, assuming you have a P in the middle of it. I'm short of a P. That's all.
Does it affect norepinephrine?
Actually, norepinephrine is going to be generated in the brainstem, and it's a systemic chemical. And norepinephrine helps set the alpha frequency. So if you have too much norepinephrine, you can be grossly over-aroused and tune too fast. It makes beta and speeds up alpha. And if you don't have enough of it, you can end up having alpha that's way too slow. It's an important aspect of your alpha frequency tuning. The cortex has some influence, but it's minor by comparison to the brainstem and thalamus, the reticular nucleus of the thalamus, and the other nuclear bodies in the thalamus basically set the base frequency that you have as your background rhythm. It's essentially like a sampling rate. If it's slow, you have a low resolution, and your semantic and declarative memory doesn't really work so well. If it's faster, all that clicks real well. So the tuning is important, and to a lot of extent, what we do in neurofeedback ends up being tuning the alpha right and getting it out of the spots it shouldn't be in. So, but the tuning of the alpha ends up making a lot of adjustments over level of norepinephrine. The norepinephrine modulators for the kids that have beta spindles, the clonidine, guanfacine is used, and they reduce both peripheral and central norepinephrine, which is why you can't just jack up the dose, because you'll drop the blood pressure out from underneath your kid. So,
Jay, you got to go.
I do have to go. We've got a whole bunch of stuff that's printed out that has to get there, and as I say, I've got to go change my clothes and get into my.
Jay, peace out. Put on that bowling shirt with pride.
And have fun without me. I know you will.
Hard to do.
And we'll catch you another time around.
All right, Jay.
Bye-bye.
Have fun.
Go West Wind.
Before we move on, though, I just want to echo and hound home again something that Jay said, that, cortisol has this bad rep, like down with cortisol. And, just supporting everything that Jay said, that cortisol is extremely important. And the issue is, too much, but you can also have, not enough. So be really, really careful about how much we demonize cortisol, again, with its immune function, et cetera, et cetera. So let's get that pendulum back in the middle where it belongs.
Saul, this is like an Irish Thanksgiving. If you don't, jump forward, you're not going to get no turkey. So I'm just letting you know. Welcome to the panel.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I appreciate
it's more like
it.
a mosh pit, Saul.
Mosh pit. Okay. Well, there we go.
Who's jumping?
Exactly.
No stage diving, please.
Mm.
Well,
I was stage had to push him back.
Any big topics at Saul's conference that he wanted to maybe talk about, or?
Yeah, Saul.
Oh gosh, I'll have to look up it's actually a whole bunch of things. There's going to be, obviously Jay will talk, I'm sure, about the queue and things like that. But we're having a nutritionist come in to talk about things. We're having people come to talk about EEG in people with autism, bringing neurofeedback into the school systems. Talk about.
Wait, was it ever in the school systems?
Well, occasionally. I mean, probably the Yonkers Project is the most well-known.
True.
And then someone's going to be talking about sort of practice building issues and our favorite topic, CPT codes. Joy's and my favorite topic, anyway. Yeah, of course.
Love it.
So it's going to be a bit of a mix of things, but there's going to be there's just one talk per time, so you don't have to choose. And it's being kind of put out as a not just a conference, but also as a retreat. It's in a retreat center, a Quaker retreat center, about 15-20 minutes from the Philadelphia airport. And so there'll be some meditations and walks and Quaker meetings if those are things that you're interested in. So a lot of that integrated into the talks as well.
Now, Saul, you're going to be on the show for our Thursday show, but could you let everybody know how to learn more about your conference?
Yeah, absolutely. You just go over to the Northeast Region Biofeedback Society website. That is nrbs.org, and you will find out about it. And this is, primarily for providers, but we also have a lot of people who are just interested in neuro and biofeedback come as part of it. The conference registration does include a membership to the NRBS for the year. And so you get discounts with our other webinars. We have a couple of member-only things that are going on through the year. So it's well worth it, I would say. Of course, I would say that, but it is well worth it.
All the information will be in the show notes. And, of course, when I forget to do it, I'm sure Saul will remind me. Absolutely. Radar Ashwood says, what's going on in the brain of someone with ASPD? I don't even know what that is. Can this be treated with neurofeedback? Any implications for neurofeedback and criminal rehabilitation, or is it too idealistic and utopian?
Not at all.
Antisocial personality disorder.
Here's the deal.
Go.
Back in maybe 2003, 2004, the federal prison systems were showing up at the ISNR meetings.
Yeah.
And they were, finding out, is this something that we can put into the rehab kind of situations? And so they first came in to learn how, but then they started coming back to the meetings. And several years later, they didn't come to the meeting, and somebody reached out to them and found out why. And one of the examples, they told us they apparently had instituted a neurofeedback program as part of one of the women's prisons in Arizona. And the difficulty they ended up having, and they had to stop the program, was because the women who were receiving the neurofeedback were becoming so compliant and well-behaved that they were no longer safe in the general population, and they had no place else geography-wise to put these women. So they were getting too well rehabbed, I guess, because their sentences weren't finished, and they didn't feel safe putting them back in the general population. So in other words, yes, it works. It's not utopian at all, but it has to be funded appropriately so that then you can move people into their new stages of capacity.
There was some old work by Doug Quirk, right, in Canadian prisons. He did a whole bunch of studies showing that with a single course of neurofeedback, the 1 year recidivism rate for reoffending and reincarceration was flipped from 75% down to 25% at the 1 year rate with just a course of neurofeedback. And these were violent offenders. These were not like low key.
Yeah.
I think he did a large number too. It was a very large study, but I've had trouble finding it because it was like done in like the late 50s, early 60s, I think.
Yeah.
But I've heard many, many elders in our field talk about Doug Quirk's work. So I feel like I've indirectly absorbed it that way. But that was very prison focused. He did some other work too, with alcohol. But that might fit into the antisocial personality stuff radar for you.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't remember the name. Maybe Saul, you might remember, or but it goes back because I remember this coming up at it was a winter brain meeting way back when. But essentially they found it was a study of inmates on death row, and they universally found that they had what we now refer to as a hot cingulate. So essentially the high beta was present in every single individual. And that kind of feeds into the rigidity and, you know, sometimes the revenge principle, you know, that can lead to murder or taking someone's life. Anyways, of course, if you soften that cognitive rigidity and that insistent on being right or revenge or whatnot, tons and tons of things can be done. Does anybody remember who did that work? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I don't remember who did it. No.
Yeah, so defiance disorder in kids, all of that little collective, you know, the certain percentage grow out of or don't grow out of. That's how we quote unquote diagnose them. I'm not getting into that, but any child who shows this rigidity, lack of remorse, my way or the highway, being right, bullying other children, go after that hot cingulate, and you can do miracles. But also, you know, going up through the brain, the age span, I think is just beyond tragic that individuals, you know, lead lives of crime and punishment based on a signature or a phenotype that can be corrected. Okay. And if you can correct it, you can, you know, I talk about correction and direction all the time. If you can just soften that, you're not changing personality, you're changing trajectory of a life, not just one life, many lives.
Anthony, can you help me with radar? So does it increase someone's ability to feel empathy if they are impaired, or maybe they're just improving impulse control? Can you piece that together, Anthony?
I mean, his question makes sense. He's asking if you address the cingulate, is it more that they're just able to retain their impulses, restrain rather, or is it that they somehow gain more empathy? You know, I know that the ventromedial PFC is involved in empathy, and I was Googling a study for him, and I think that the cingulate may be involved there, but I'll let others address which they think it is.
Well, Doug Quirk did alpha theta, so I mean, it was alpha theta that created this effect. So I think that's our answer for at least part of its empathy and emotional connection, I would assume.
Yeah, we want to be a bit cautious about that. I mean, I'm just looking at what Radar has, hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, but what Radar has on the screen, asking, so is a hot cingulate genetic? Because I have that and my sister is insanely rigid. So thank you for that question. Yeah, no, but I mean, one of the things you have to be really careful about, and I use this example all the time, it's just, you know, it's an example that's used in statistics or generalization 101. All cats have 4 legs, but it doesn't mean all animals with 4 legs are cats. Okay. So my example for a hot cingulate is a 2-sided coin. Okay, so the one side of the coin, it can be extremely positive in terms of drive. You'll find most elite athletes, extremely successful entrepreneurs, etc., have this signature. There's a real positive side to it as well. And of course, we know about the negative. The other example I use all the time with my clients is a pit bull. Okay, you've got a pit bull in your head. There's nothing inherently wrong with the animal. It's how and why the animal is trained. So if you're a police pit bull and you will jump over waterfalls and climb up hills and there's nothing you won't do to catch that criminal, that's a good pit bull. But if you're a pit bull in a schoolyard, okay, I don't even have to run through the whole metaphor. That's not a good pit bull. So, do we need to dampen your pit bull, retrain your pit bull? And again, this is where I talk about direction versus correction. People with really hot singulates, there's nothing that won't stop them. These are the people that, write books in 6 months and just do incredible things. Athletes and artists, nothing will stop them from their goal. It's not necessarily negative. But if your goal is killing somebody, we got a problem. Okay. Now, I mean, I don't mean to make light of this, but we have to be really, really careful about what we correct and why we correct it. There's also a lot of, sorry? Yep.
I was just going to support, for people who like movies, it's an older one, but Al Pacino in Heat. People ask him, well, why can't your marriages go well? And he says, I am only as good as what I'm chasing. You said that you mentioned the cop. He plays a cop, and you said they lock on. He says, if I'm not chasing something, I'm dead. I'm not alive. And so he's not in his marriage. And they even say, man, you leave wreckage, where it's his third marriage or something movie. So I guess I just raised that to say, there's probably trade-offs in some of this.
Always. And this is, if we want to get into couples therapy, et cetera. Yeah. If you have two people with a hot singulate, I joke, I call that the divorce signature, unless two people are equally driven non-competitively. Okay. They don't compete with each other, and whatever they're pursuing does not compete with the marriage. Okay. These are really high performing couples, generally speaking, and they understand that, hey, we get home at 11 o'clock at night. That's okay. Right. So it's really a matter of how you work it out. It's kind of like addiction. Everybody knows alcoholism is a problem. Okay. So is cocaine and other things. Okay. But what about workaholism? Okay. Many spouses think that's a pretty negative addiction. The
Gen
bank
Z doesn't
loves
worry about
addiction. Sorry?
Gen Z's not worried about that.
That was good.
Okay. Gen X is giggling.
What percentage of the people have a hot singlet?
Yeah.
Well, statistically, you can answer that. Just 1/3. That's a population metric.
Yeah,
Wow,
there you
okay.
go.
Dr.
And did
Hill,
you know it gets
And
stronger with females through the life cycle? Post-menopause, you've probably noticed, whether it's your mother, your grandmother, your auntie, yourself, your wife, your daughter, whatever, there's a certain switch that starts to click with females where they, I want to swear. Can I swear here? They don't give a oof anymore, right? They're just kind of going after it. And I think,
I'm demonetized.
Yeah. No, but I think there might be something there to just being tired of always being humble or towing the line. Another part of it is, I think, I don't know about the hormonal influence. Obviously, there is something there, but you will find the high beta ratio goes up with age in women, and you will find powerhouses in more mature females just for that reason. Joy, you want to jump in there as the other female on the panel?
Yeah, I want to get loosened up a little bit here because I am gonna. It's like we're worried about hot singing. I'm sorry. I get a little worked up when we talk about parts of the brain and what they do, and we limit it to that. Okay. Yep. He says his sister is incredibly rigid. Mm-hmm. Okay. If she's in my office, I have at least 10 questions to ask about that rigidity.
Yeah.
Because you know what else makes people rigid? Sensory integration difficulties. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. They get real whacked out. They can't go to that restaurant, and they can't. And if you move their shoes, you might as well just crawl under the carpet and die. Yeah, so why? You cannot just pull up brain areas and say, it must be that. Okay. Don't do that.
Yeah.
Not even if you have a cue, because unless you take that person and match them to their cue, putting that electrode there may or may not work.
Good point, Joy. I mean, we take for granted here that when we ramble on that we all kind of know the limitations we're talking about, et cetera. So thanks for bringing that up. Okay, gentlemen are silent. Oh, no.
Well, you know, after a certain point, we just go downhill. So there's no drive. The drive goes.
All right.
Ironically, that is true.
Anthony, what's driving traffic to your tech channel? And Dr. Hill, what's going on? Who are you sending all those remote packages to?
Does he want to go first?
Sure. Yeah, we have all kinds of people getting remote kits these days. We're doing a lot of work with the Amen clinics too. So they're sending us a lot of clients because they do, of course, SPECT scanning, but then they don't have necessarily brain-focused interventions that are physiological. It's more brain coaching and diet and lifestyle, medication, et cetera. So like functional medicine stuff. So we work with the Amen clinics a lot these days and see some of their clients. And we've got a bunch of offices in the US and overseas, but most of our clients never see our offices. And so this morning I was troubleshooting an amp, USB cable for somebody in Dubai. And then my next call was somebody in Portugal. My next call was somebody, in Oman. So, it's, if you've got a brain and you have equipment, you can train it, is our perspective. People ask me when I'm doing pre-sales, do you get better effects? Is it better to do it in the office? And I say, no, you get better effects when you do it from home, because people train more, they pay more attention, and they're captive audiences for getting reports. They have a private Slack channel. So I'm like, hey, haven't seen a sleep survey in 2 days. What's up? And, we get a much more round trip, real-time communication. So those of you who do neurofeedback who are on the panel or listening, I bet you would agree the biggest challenge to doing neurofeedback is having people tell us how it feels afterwards. At least for me, that's the biggest point of failure, is that feedback from the client.
We're insistent upon it. Like every, we guarantee that, we check in and we write everything down. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, anybody in this business needs to control the subjective as well.
Yeah, but Dr. Hill, 80% of the stuff that you do is remote.
Yeah.
At least everybody else, the other 20% have people and you can put your fingers on them. I mean, you are the one that's answering the trouble tickets. Like,
sometimes.
What is?
I have a team. I mean, I have 15 people in Peak Brain or so beyond me.
Well, when they're sending the box out, I mean, what is the first thing that comes up when somebody's doing a remote? They didn't plug it into the wall. Like, what's the?
I've done a lot of work in high tech jobs, and my very first high tech boss, his words of wisdom have always resonated. 9 times out of 10, the answer's on the screen. The 10th time, it's not plugged in. Like yes, that's a lot of it. And I use Eager, which can be a little finicky if you take your amp and unplug it, replug it, you just crash the software. So there's a bunch of gotchas that we got used to providing support. But we've got really good documentation when someone needs a new location. We have a whole cheat sheet and way to find locations in the head. We teach people over a couple of weeks on how to set up basic software, how to run signals, how to log what they're doing. And then we have a real-time shared desktop we can jump on and troubleshoot if they hit trouble. And so people go from doing handheld guided work into taking photographs of their head and screens for checking their new setups to training deeply. I mean, I have clients who are, one of the things I've discovered about home training and self-training is, because I'm not a clinician, because I'm a scientist teaching about your brain and giving you agency instead of fixing a particular problem, people tend to train with me for a lot longer too. They self-select training programs that are very, very long sometimes. So I have clients up in the 700-800 session counts these days sometimes, who are exceptionally good neurofeedback trainers themselves. And my work with them is like, that's a good protocol, twice more, good job, because they know how to do it all. They've been doing it for years now. So,
but training a tech to do this,
yeah,
that's hard enough.
It is. I have amazing,
and they quit and work for somebody else. So
I have amazing brain coaches. I have a handful of people who've been working with me for, many of them 10 years or more. Peak Brain's just over 9 years old, but my previous company, Alternatives, was around for 2.5 years, 3.5 years. So a lot of these people have been with me for over a decade. And, I was their professor in gerontology and neuroscience courses at UCLA. And then I was their intern manager. And then I was their employer. So a lot of these folks that are now in their like mid 30s, I've seen, since when they were neuroscientists, and now they're very skilled. Like my coaches are as skilled as most high level neurotherapists are in our field because of how close to data we always work. So, and we're always teaching clients about their own brains. That creates a very different relationship with EEG. I not any of you guys, I'm sure, but we know people in our field who don't know what they're doing, and they run recipe books or they run software.
Yeah. That's the danger.
That's the danger. And they run, especially if you believe your software is magical, because then when it doesn't work, you don't know what to do. If it does work, great.
Like automatic artifact.
Not just that, but like automatic protocol selection.
Yeah.
For instance, there's a lot of systems out there that say they don't use protocols, but they do. And there's systems out there that has a limited set of protocols off of complaint lists. Both of those systems don't work that well. If you're weird, then weird things happen.
Yeah, and it's dangerous. I mean, one of the things you'll find in this panel, we don't have to argue about anything. The way I and my clinic works is very, very different. I mean, we're known for being rather insistent that people come into the clinic. We are so personalized it isn't funny. And the appeal of our clinic is exactly the opposite, in that we do extremely personalized, I would say intensive, and our clients are extremely short term. They both work. And I'm going to toot my horn, and I'm going to toot Andrew's horn. It's because, we've really, really developed these methods. And I would say, based on the client profile, you find the person that works well with you. It's kind of like, do you want to go to the gym every single week to keep yourself in shape until 85? Or do you want to, get a personal trainer to get you in and have a 20-week program, right? Both work depending on what your goals are. But I think every single person here, and probably almost every person who gets invited on this panel, really, really, really knows their stuff. So that's why there's no argument in terms of methods. But anybody who has not put the legwork in and the education in and the training in, who doesn't know how to read the raw signal, I mean, the list is long. None of what we're saying qualifies. So I have to.
Guys, Triona had a question on that note. Outside of sleep, what are your usual questions for checking in after training? And do you ask for feedback 24, 48 hours later, etc.?
Hey, Triona. Thanks for showing up. Nice to see you.
Dr. Hill.
I ask for reports every day, twice a day, regardless of if you're training or not. I just like people to log stuff. Now, compliance is iffy, and I have systems to keep that in place. But I'm building new software you guys can use if you want for tracking and reporting at some point this year. But I ask for feedback routinely, but I don't assume it's from the neurofeedback. I want to know how your states and traits and goals are shifting day to day, regardless of if it's neurofeedback or not. Sometimes it might be, and you can tell, oh, that beta wave, was too fast. Apparently, if you were wired and cleaned your whole house last night, whoops. But usually it's more like just gradual watching the trend of the arc across time, and then trying to get enough of a sampling, right? This is Nyquist theorem. You got to sample their surveys twice as often as they have experiences change to figure out what's happening. Yeah. So
perfect case in point. I ask for them once a week. Okay. Cause I want to see.
But you also see them in person every day.
Yeah, exactly. So entirely different methods, same kind of results in terms of, you don't want to deal with that, spike. You want to see if that spike means something, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, twice a day versus once a week, big difference. And they both work.
I think one of the greatest things, now I'm a podcast guy. In another life, I had a clinic in the Midwest, and I made more money doing podcasts, which is not saying a lot. One of the greatest things I did, one of the greatest things I figured out was a drip campaign where I would survey everybody. When they got done with a tech, I would say, hey, what, rate your experience. Was it better or worse or whatever? And then over time, I thought that was the greatest thing. Is like 1 hour. They didn't always fill it out, but an hour after, when they get home, they would fill out, hey, how do you feel? How was the experience with the person that performed? What could we do better? I think that is something that everybody's got to, whether it's Constant Contact, Survey Monkey, or whatever. I think that's a great thing everybody should learn.
My approach is a little bit different. They ask what questions you ask other than sleep. That's determined during my assessment.
Yeah.
So when we sit down, one of my last questions is, what are you going to notice so that you'll think the neurofeedback is doing something? What would change? What would be something that you would say, oh, that's different?
Yeah.
And I ask them specifically, we need to talk every time you come in, and I see people 3 times a week.
Yeah.
We need to talk every single time you come in, and I'm trying to get, I would like this to be a growing list. At first, you may not understand everything I'm asking, but give me some ideas of, if something changed, what would you consider different? And that's my starting point, right? The list does grow because people become aware and more self-aware to say, oh, and you know what else changed? What I realized that I'm just not ruminating like I was.
Yeah,
like that. So it can be highly individual. Also, when I check in with them, yes, I absolutely check in with them 3 times a week. But if they're brand new and they're a little iffy, I'm going to contact them some way, shape, or form within those first 24 hours. How you doing? Or I tell them, make sure you check in 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. I give them some idea when it's time for you to think about making an evaluation about today's session. That's when people are new because they don't really know. So we give them the guidance and all that.
I also have boundaries than you guys do. I mean, I have a much more accessible team than therapists can have or psychologists can have. My clients, every one of them has a private Slack channel that's wide open, staffed 12 hours a day by a team of coaches who are answering real questions, touching base, bugging them. So clients are like constantly communicated with. Yeah. And therapists can't do that. That's a very inappropriate in some ways. You want to have a little bit of a boundary. And we kind of don't. We're kind of like running around the virtual gym going, yay, good for you. It's like the soul cycle model, but we're trying to be like in their face a little bit with constant, cheering and encouragement and support. And hey, what did you mean by this statement you said in that sleep survey last night? And we get a little intrusive because we're always there in their pocket asking questions. So
it's a coaching model versus, if you're a psychologist, you're actually working towards your own extraction. I mean, it's just part of the nature of the discipline that if you're in there too long, it means you're not doing your job well. So they're entirely different intervention models, and we have to recognize that. But I want to loop back to what Joy said, like same thing. We have extensive questionnaires on intake. And then I ask people, okay, what's your top 3? And then we match that up with what we see in the EEG. And, we over time, they can switch. But I find if I work with more than 3 things at a time, things get really confusing and convoluted. And it also forces a client to really choose what's important to them. And we can really track and see what's changing, obviously with the EEG, but also their subjective experience. So I would say the questions are based on the client's goals and if, when, how fast, how slow they're moving. And when objectives have been met, is it over? Or do we slide on to what was number 4 now becomes number 1 or number 2? But I guess I want to repeat that all of us have, we're not talking about competitive models. We're talking about different models that work possibly for different client profiles, but also under the umbrellas of our professions, our registrations, our licenses, et cetera. So everybody has to keep that in mind.
Guys, hey, real quick, speaking of top issues, Radar has another quote, or a question rather. Is the hot singlet issue connected to sexual paraphilias? I've heard people say OCD is connected to this type of hypersexuality. And so would it be connected to a singlet issue?
Yes, but not directly. The connectivity there is through the anterior part of the temporal lobe. So yes, you have the cingulate involved in those connections that pass by the insula, but you're talking about, you can see this in classic neuropsych injury studies. The the Kluver-Bucy syndromes. That's an example of a very narrow hypersexuality turned all the way up. When you lose the anterior tips of the temporal lobe, and you have disinhibited sexuality with often an oral focus and often like there's other complicated behaviors around it. It's that tissue just behind there that seems to be tied into the cingulates and the posterior, the TPJ, the environmentally focused, right, temporoparietal. So yes, the cingulate might be where you see it on a brain map, but it's not coming from the cingulate probably. It's coming from temporoparietal areas in terms of a driver is my take on it. I'm biased though.
Very interesting.
That's my take on it, having seen a lot of it actually. So
Yeah.
Awesome.
And how you been, buddy? Does anyone here ever do feedback with more than 2 channels?
Yes, but
yeah, exactly right. Yeah, sure, but
yes, he wants to take the butt. No, there are definitely some circumstances where it can be recommended, and definitely some circumstances where it's not recommended. I think any one of us could have really long, drawn out answers here, but I'm reticent to give anything specific because that really is going to depend 100% on.
Hold on, Dr. Marie, because always check with your primary care physician first. This show is just for entertainment and informational purposes only. Continue.
Okay, just what I was saying. It's so client dependent. I find when I target with 1 or 2 channels, I move faster. But there's definitely a time and a place to really, really try and shift the whole brain. But I'd say a lot of I'm trying to be diplomatic here, but maybe I shouldn't bother. I would say a lot of folks that are using systems, the push button systems, the more channels they engage, the better. And it's just playing with spaghetti, wiggle and jiggle. And no, that is not what we're talking about. I would say when anyone on this panel and our true cohorts do that, we have an extremely specific objective in doing so.
Yeah, more channels is not more EEG training, FYI. It's just more math before you do the EEG training. You're still training a signal at the scalp. You're not training deep in the brain. People think that you're training cortically or subcortically with Loretta or Z-score. No, you're still training the scalp signal you've solved for. So,
and in keeping with trying to keep the NeuroNoodle safety stuff, I'm going to verbally ask that we not talk about protocols here. I see in these questions here, there's trading protocol advice, which is, can we say that's really off limits?
You just did.
I don't know who these people are. I don't know what their level of experience is. And I don't really want to make suggestions that might look like we're condoning any kind of multiple.
I'm sorry. Hold on, Joy. Do you have a different disclaimer than I do?
No, but I felt like Pete fell under your like, hey, we're,
Yeah.
We're
anytime somebody feels uncomfortable, you put your own disclaimer out there. We're out here, we're podcasting, okay? We're not touching your scalp. Check with your primary care physician first, right? This is for entertainment and informational purposes only.
Yeah, we're clinicians and scientists, but probably not your clinicians.
Yeah.
There we go. Beautifully put. Beautifully put.
That's why D Hill.
And I know that the people answering and asking questions here aren't each other's clinicians, which that's what I'm most disturbed by, is they're sharing stuff amongst themselves online here.
Well,
I will point out
the internet's doing that.
There is important to point out there's a gap between channels 1 through 4 and 19. There's a hole there in the field, right? So what you've asked those people, whoever was Radar, I think asked or Ben about channel density. Those of us using 1 through 4 channels have a philosophical, a scientific, and a training approach that's kind of different than those people that are invested into full head training. Even if you start getting into 4 channels, which as far as I know, the only like well-developed 4-channel training approach is Rob Coben's multivariate coherence. I've used that. It works fine, but I don't. I'm sorry?
Z-score training is 4 channels.
It can be, yeah. But I mean, why would you do 4-channel Z-score training without doing a Loretta? Now you're just like cutting off. You're cheating.
Except people do.
It doesn't make sense though, because the Z-score is not at a location, right? So,
no, right. That's no. But
the point is, there are ways you can do good neurofeedback with single channels or with a full head. but you can also be completely wrong and do the wrong thing with one channel or 19. And the number of channels does not make the neurofeedback. What
Can
you
I
do with
throw
it,
in here, you are more likely to see that something isn't working or that you're doing something wrong with one channel than with 19. And that's also why I dare to say that it can be safer. Now, notice all my conditionals in there, okay? But if for whatever reason, you set some parameter wrong or the wrong direction, you are going to catch it immediately unless you're an idiot. Oh God, I'm getting bad here. But we have to kind of throw it out, maybe I should retract, some of what I said. I don't want anybody working in this unless they really know what they're doing. But too many people don't really know what the equipment is doing. And I would say, if you don't know what the equipment is doing, you don't know what you're doing. And I see more of that with more channels. I don't see as much of that when we're working with fewer channels, because when you work with fewer channels, you need to know what you're doing. You need some precision, and the safety net there is you can also see very clearly when something isn't going right.
I wish I knew Dr. Marie like 5 years ago when Steve Stenz was around, when I bought my two 19-channel Nexus $20,000 amplifiers. Dr. Hill, the problem that we run into is it's hard to differentiate the audience that comes in, because you have end users, you have clinicians, and in between. Like, how do you do it? You've been around longer than I have. Because who knows, right now we have an audience is more like end users and, technicians, but you got moms and dads that are coming on. They're trying to figure out, oh, my kid is this and that. How do you deal with the three different audiences in the one podcast that you do?
Well, I mean, I do I have my live stream. I have my own branded podcast. Then I do a lot of guest podcasts. I have hundreds out there at this point. And what I find is I'm never selling neurofeedback or talking about a particular technique. I'm always just dropping back to explaining some neuroscience. That's the way that I sell, is I evangelize, which ends up being breaking down topics that are complicated into simple ideas about the brain again and again and again. So this is how I do neurofeedback too. I don't hew to the DSM. I instead look at brain resources and drop below the level of diagnostic buckets if I can. I'm not a clinician, so I don't want to be in a diagnostic, conformational role. One of my jokes is doctors are great, but they have to be right. Go to doctors for answers. Come to scientists for questions. We'll help you figure things out, help you test ideas. And
that's why you want a science practitioner. Can I just interrupt? Because and if you want to pick this up in a moment, there's some stuff coming on the screen that is poking. Okay.
Marie, practitioners' level of tension rising.
Yeah, no, practitioners make mistakes and regular make up brains. Good practitioners don't. What are you calling a practitioner? Okay. So no, go to qualified people and you won't have mistakes and you won't mess up brains.
Needs to be regulated.
Yeah, well, that's
also
the whole
moving
other
slowly
one,
is important.
Right?
Like, you don't take side effects instantly.
And a true scientist going, what Andrew was saying, a science practitioner isn't experimenting. Okay, they are using acquired knowledge to inform what they're doing. We have to be really careful about going too straight here. So, Andrew, kindly redirect if you feel that I'm going. That I'm miswording things, but many doctors work within certain regulations. Okay, and there's this beautiful middle spot of experimental practice, but it's not an experiment per se. You're not experimenting with people's brains. A true science practitioner knows exactly what they're doing, why they're doing it. They explain the risks and they explain the benefits. Okay, we're not playing with brains here. With any chance of messing up a brain, we do not do it. And again, Andrew and Joy, please jump in. I didn't mean to
side effects
interrupt.
do happen. That's the thing. I mean, radar is very valid, and Joy and I have seen people all over Reddit complaining about ab reactions, and with a handful of sessions getting stuck in that mode for months. It does happen. Generally,
happening with? That's my point.
That's the question. Is like, Andrew, that doesn't happen to your people, does it?
No, it doesn't happen to my people. My 10,000 or so people, I've seen it one or two times, literally once or twice in 10,000 people.
In over 30 years.
Yeah. I mean, in 25 years, I've seen significant side effects, like not even one or two times. It's really, really, really rare. But I have other, people that come to me every month. I get clients coming in who have profound anxiety, who have DPDR, who've got something going on because they feel it's because of neurofeedback. Now, I'm also a little bit, part of my trick in neurofeedback is never to make conclusions, right? Your mind's led you astray when you reach a conclusion. Very Buddhist perspective. And with the brain, we kind of have to do some of that. So when somebody comes in suffering about something that happened to them, my perspective is really believing what they're saying in terms of their experience, but holding my conclusions at bay in terms of why or what happened, because people have lots of ideas about their brain. And I did this thing with this person, I feel crappy afterwards. Some people have lots of suffering and dysregulation, and you can have that tripped by a scowl from a bad provider, not necessarily the neurofeedback from a bad provider. So I really just try to meet people where they are. And if they're suffering with what they feel is neurofeedback created side effects, abreactions, I believe that's true if they do. But I'm not concerned about it because I just want to back them out of that phenomena as quickly as possible. So I feel that the potential for side effects is also sort of proof that what we do works very well, because it's, when applied without care, can push people in the wrong direction. But just to harp on this side effect thing for a second, side effects rarely happen with one or two sessions. Certainly not with, again, Mari, what you were saying about single channel, 2-channel, it's a little more discreet, moves a little slower. You have time to catch side effects too. You put a full head on somebody and train aggressively, a whole bunch, 75 parameters at once, you might create side effects. But if you're doing traditional neurofeedback, you got to work at creating a side effect that's more than transient, in my experience.
But Andrew, I just want to step in. In order to have a side effect, there has to be an effect.
Well, a side effect is an effect, right? I mean,
what I'm saying is, some people say neurofeedback doesn't do anything, right?
Yeah, you never believe it works so well as the day you do the wrong protocol.
Right.
Yep.
And the second thing I want to throw in there. Okay, Santiago Brand says he's an overglorified technician. I'm an overglorified video editor. The one thing that I've heard is with neurofeedback, it is an experiment because you are moving things around.
It's not experimental, it's iterative.
What's the difference?
Well, experimental is testing an idea and trying to come up with data.
Okay.
We're not trying to get to an answer. We're trying to iterate towards resources changing, create goal congruent movement in people's experience and resources. You have to change gears by doing that. You can't stick with the same workout. Yes, you're going to mix it up. Yes, you're going to experiment by trying different things, but it's not an experiment. It's not experimental. It's iterative. It's progressive. It's, you don't understand somebody from their brain map on day one as much as they might think you do. I always tell people, as much as this seems like I can spot all these cold things about you, I'm just getting a sense of big resources. You're still in charge as we go of letting us know how you notice things.
Anthony, I'm talking too much. Can you take care of Radar's last question? We'll let everybody.
No, I'm going to do that.
Oh boy.
I'm sorry.
Girl.
But Radar has sort of revealed some stuff. He doesn't know much about neurofeedback. SMR is not really well tolerated. It is not. Because first of all, if you say SMR, you have to mean 12 to 15 times a second. Otherwise, tell me what numbers you're using. SMR, sensory motor rhythm, as coined by Barry Sturman, is 12 to 15 times a second. And I can tell you, after my assessment, I know perfectly well if I can just blow you up out of the water and send you home as miserable as you've ever been in your life, if I ask your brain to produce more 12 to 15. It is not generally well tolerated. You have got to know the head you're introducing that information to. So that blows it out.
I find it very well tolerated. Sorry.
Andrew, I can't tolerate it.
Now, I don't just pick 12 hertz and throw it on the head either. Like, I think about, is there anxiety, aging, infirmity, et cetera, and I tune the frequency. I was trained in the arousal model back on the East Coast.
Andrew, you don't think that's where I
but you have to tune it. But I rarely get side effects from SMR training, and when I do get side effects, they're useful. I use them. I try to learn from them. I try 12 hertz, and someone says, "Wow, I felt kind of wired," and then I slept great. Oh, okay, 11 3/4.
You're using it correctly. You're evaluating that head.
But I'm not getting side effects with SMR generally.
No, but well, I'll tell you what.
I don't consider that a side effect. I don't consider a mild ab reaction after a session a side effect.
I guess. I mean,
I think you two are much closer than you think you are. Joy, you're just talking about caution, and Andrew, you're talking about successes, right? And so,
well, I'll tell you what. Anybody that
caution has been used.
Yeah,
and the number right, because obviously what you're saying is that you use it cautiously, and then you're not going to get generally bad results at all. You're evaluating every head.
I mean, the other thing that I think everybody on this panel knows is you take a baseline on your SMR and you compare your SMR to your theta. You get a nice little ratio, and you make sure you're doing it, at C3 or C4, generally speaking, not confusing it with CZ. So there's all this stuff that we're not putting on the table that we are just making assumptions on. And as I said, I think Joy and Andrew, you're saying the same thing. Joy is just putting out a huge caution flag here. And we're also presuming that when somebody says they did SMR training, we're presuming that it's at the right location, that they can differentiate between low beta and SMR, that they're actually over the motor strip, that they actually have a comparative in amplitude to competitive waves. Need I go on?
Okay, we're at time. What I'd like to do is, the number one rule in entertainment is always leave the crowd wanting more. So we will have a show tomorrow with Saul. You're going to join us tomorrow?
I'll be there.
Okay, we'll be there. The panel has the links. If somebody wants to show up, it's just like an early, it's like having lunch. Come on in, whoever, comes in. What I'd like to do is to close out this panel discussion, starting with Saul. Tell us your details, and we'll move around to Joy, then Dr. Marie, Anthony, and Dr. Hill. How can everybody find out more about you? Starting with you, Saul.
Sure. So I'm in the Boston area, so I'm an East Coaster, and you can find out more about my practice at advancedbehavioral.care.
Joy, I want to hear more about you. Not really, but where could everybody else find out more about you?
I'm near Los Angeles in Burbank. Been here since 2003. Prior to that, I had a practice in Chicago starting in 1993. I am a general practitioner. I started this way back when, before we all learned how to specialize. So basically, if you walked in my door and it seemed neurofeedback was appropriate, I learned how to work on you. So my experience has been in a very generalized sense. I guess the best description that somebody told me is that I have a boutique practice. This is where Andrew and I have a very different approach to this, and we're both happy with what we got. I run every session in my office. So that limits how many I can see every week and what I can do. But, makes me happy. I like interacting with the people. I like watching their changes. So that's how I do business.
So look up Joy Lunt, Lunt on Google, then bam. You got attitude. Dr. Marie Swingle.
It's earned. It's earned, Pete. It's earned.
It's earned. I hear you, girl. I hear you, girl. Dr. Marie Swingle, we'll see you tomorrow morning, but your calling card is.
Yeah, and find out more about me and the Swingle Clinic at swingleclinic.com. We opened the clinic 27 years ago. We were one of the first first 3 clinics in all of Canada. I don't know about the US, but we were in from the get-go. And before I was working in neuro, I was an educator. So come by all of this rather honestly, second generation doing this. I think I'm pretty broad scoped.
You are quite the broad scoped. Anthony Ramos.
Whoa.
Hey everybody. Just find me on Facebook. I'm learning with all of you as much as I can, and also trying to report what I'm learning. So
Hold on, man. Your Facebook group, you got thousands in that room.
Yeah, science and technology discoveries, some of the other neurofeedback groups I'll post in. There's some very good groups, at least that you can contact, Jay is in some of those groups. So there are qualified people there. You have to take a grain of salt, though, as we've learned.
Really? Like this show?
Yeah. So, yeah.
Dr. Andrew Hill, 80% remote business.
That's right. So I own peakbraininstitute.com. You can check us out there, but we have physical offices in New York City, St. Louis, LA, Orange County, London, Stockholm, and a lot of our clients never see our offices. So we can send you brain mapping equipment. We do remote brain mapping, remote traditional neurofeedback, and come find us. And I do, of course, podcasts and live streams myself all over the place. So if you want to hear me talk, you certainly can. So
you got the voice for it. Anybody ever send you back an empty box?
Yeah. Yep. Well, I lose one QEG amp a year. About half of those are because FedEx just loses it. About half the time it shows up as an empty package. We lose one QEG amplifier a year. Yep. Yeah. So there's $6,000 down the toilet. So.
Hey, panel, crowd, everybody, we're trying to figure this thing out. Feedback always works. Life is about feedback, just like neurofeedback. Any ideas, please send them in. Everybody, every Wednesday, 6 p.m. Central Time, you feel like you missed out, send me an email, pete@neuronoodle.com. Saul and I and Dr. Marie, the rest of the crew, will figure it out tomorrow. Peace out, all.
Bye.
Good one.
All right.
Thanks.
Bye.
All right, end stream. Hold on.